Ladies and gentlemen, the program will begin in 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, again, we remind you to find a seat. The program is about to get underway. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the W.E.B. DuBois Plenary Session at this NABJ 2019 National Convention and Career Fair. Please be advised this event is being recorded and streamed for local, regional, and national audiences via social media and other web and broadcast platforms. Right now, please join us in welcoming to the stage Editor-in-Chief of Zora by Medium magazine and former Editor-in-Chief of Essence magazine, Miss Vanessa DeLuca.
Hello, NABJ. How are you doing? Welcome to the W.E.B. Plenary. Thank you so much for being here for this very candid and lively discussion on confronting diversity, race, and culture. Before we get started, please join me in welcoming our gracious sponsor with Uber. Javi Carreros is the public affairs, Corioso is the public affairs manager with Uber Technologies. Please welcome him right now.
Thank you. Has everyone been enjoying the water park yet? It's one of our newest attractions in South Florida, so everyone's excited about it. So really hope you get a chance to enjoy it while you're here in Miami, and it's a good opportunity to get away from the humidity as well. Uber's a proud sponsor of this year's conference. Diversity and inclusion is core to who we are. Our almost 27,000 employees, our 3 million driver and delivery partners, and our millions of customers represent every facet of diversity that can be imagined. From gender, race and ethnicity, socioeconomic status, culture, gender identity, and abilities, the ecosystem of Uber is one where people from different backgrounds and lives come together on our platform every day to move and ignite opportunity. As soon as he joined Uber, our CEO, Dara, placed diversity and inclusion alongside our other business priorities to ensure we were prioritizing and focusing on solutions the same way we did priorities like our commitment to safety. These priorities have resulted in real, tangible progress. Earlier this summer, we published our 3rd annual Diversity and Inclusion Report, and we made the decision to publish for the very first time an intersectional identity cut of our workforce. This level of transparency is our commitment to say we want to ensure that every community within Uber, and especially our women of color, are benefiting and gaining from our focus on diversity and inclusion. The numbers matter, but they're only a starting point. A commitment to diversity and inclusion has to run much deeper. That's why we've set an audacious goal: to make Uber the most diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace on the planet. And we're not just setting high expectations for our own good. We're aiming sky high, because we know from experience that reducing and eliminating inequity is hard to do if all you shoot for is incremental change. Thank you very much, and once again, welcome to South Florida.
Thank you, Javi, with Uber for sharing those words with us. Now, I'd like to welcome our panelists tackling the issue this afternoon. And please hold your applause for all of our guests until the end of the introductions. First, let's welcome the Vice President of CBS News, Kim Godwin. And the Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion with Verizon Media, Ramcess Jean-Louis. We also have the Vice President of Local News at USA Today, Amalia Nash. Please welcome our panelists. Thank you all for being here. This is wonderful. Let's jump right into it. I think we're all top of mind thinking about diversity in terms of the presidential 2020 election. And so how important do you think diversity and inclusion, both in front of and behind the camera, will be to the coverage of the presidential 2020 race?
I'll begin, but I have to make a point before I answer that question. Just thinking about this panel. This is not my homework. I asked my assistant to put together just a couple of articles so that I could look at trends in diversity across the country, across our industry. And within a couple of hours, he had a whole notebook full of articles. And as I was reading them, going through them, I said, this is ridiculous. This is 30 years and the headlines are still the same. Still the same. There is a business case for diversity. Duh. Diversity increases performance. It increases innovation. It increases the number of customers you can have. The same arguments have been made. The same studies are being done when I started in the business 35 years ago. So as we become a minority country, which, within the next 5 to 7 years we will be, and as we look at this 2020 election, yes, we do need people of color, people of all ethnicities and gender and religions in our newsrooms to cover this race. Look at this week. Why? Look at El Paso. Look at where we've been going for the last year. So the case just keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger for why we need people of color in front of, behind the camera, in the middle, in between, on top. We need people of all communities with a seat at the table all the time, not just for this election, but all the time.
Well, I understand why, but maybe, Ramcess, you can elaborate on why that is so critical, especially now.
Sure. So just to add to what Kim said, Kim actually hit it right on the nail in terms of the why. Why is it important? Better decision-making, better profitability, better engagement, better tenure to innovation. Now, how does that contribute to the larger story just overall? A couple of examples come to mind. So overall, when you take a look at the data, because everything that you do in the diversity and inclusion space have to go back to data, take a look at the number of diverse CEOs that we have in this country. That number has declined. It went backwards. It did not go forward. I'm originally from New York, Verizon Media, as you mentioned. Verizon Media is Yahoo, AOL, Huffington Post, Bill Studios. In New York, we have Stuyvesant High School, very prominent school that everybody really likes to have their children go to. I believe this past year they admitted maybe 8 or 7 African-American students. The year before that, the number was still low. At the height, one year, they had admitted maybe about 300. There was 300 African-Americans matriculating through the school. How does that happen? How do we, automatically people think that progress will just happen over time. That is not the case. We spend a lot of time talking about unconscious bias. That seems to be the magic pill. Something happens, there's an incident, close down, let's do some unconscious bias training, and we've cured all the problems. That's not how you do it. You do it by conscious inclusion. What is conscious inclusion? You got to have a plan. You just got to have a deliberate plan in terms of looking at the data, measuring it, and making a decision on how you're going to hold yourself accountable to making sure that we have progress in this place. So why is it important? It's important for all of the reasons that we mentioned. But if we don't keep our eyes on the prize, if we don't stay woke, the wrong things will happen. We'll slip.
Amalia, what are your observations on this?
So Kim mentioned El Paso. The El Paso Times is one of our newsrooms in the USA Today network, and they obviously worked around the clock over the last week. It's one of our most diverse newsrooms, and so having people in that newsroom who have an understanding of their community, who have an understanding of what people were going through in this past week, as it relates to the shooting really reflected in the coverage. It reflected in the way that they understood the pain and that they were able to reflect that back to the community and everything from the editorials to the news reporting they did. And you can't do that unless you have the diversity in the newsroom. So that certainly applies to all coverage, and it applies to the presidential election as we look at all the issues, and obviously racial issues are going to be huge, and so you can't report on those unless you reflect communities better.
What are some, just shifting gears a little bit, what are some conversations about diversity and inclusion that you haven't been asked about? Like, what are some things that you think are missing, have been avoided, that should actually be a part of this conversation?
Well, you hit it, you started this conversation, and I think the idea that unconscious bias training is the buzzword and the thing that we need to do, and understanding that at some point unconscious becomes conscious bias. That can't be an excuse all the time. You know, they didn't know or didn't understand. At some point it has to be a conscious decision not to do, because of the space that we're in, of what's happening in America. We already know that we need diverse voices. So if we don't have them in our newsrooms, if we don't have them around the editorial table, and if we are not actively, keyword actively, trying to change that, then it's a choice not to do it.
I'm just curious, have you heard people actually say, I didn't know, I wasn't aware, you know, or is that something that...
I didn't know, yes. I didn't know, I wasn't aware, yes. I'm trying to find, or I just can't find, or I don't know where to look, or can you help me? You know, it's all of those things. Yeah, heard it a lot. But you have to plan. It has to be intentional. Diversity and inclusion is intentional. It is an action plan that actually has measurements.
Perfect point. So one of the things that I think I often hear, or I'd like to hear more often, is who owns diversity and inclusion, and you often hear you need to have buy-in from senior leadership. I think you actually have to take it a step further. You need more than just buy-in. You need your senior leaders, and it has to be owned by the business, diversity and inclusion. D&I would not be successful if it lives in the HR department by itself, or if it lives in the D&I department. Leaders have to hold themselves accountable. We have to find ways to be able to leverage them as executive champions, and they need to be able to hold their own direct reports responsible as well.
Emily, have you experienced any pushback in terms of, you know, just that very point, just getting, you know, buy-in and a commitment to diversity and inclusion?
I think it's a pushback in that it hasn't been emphasized enough. And so, you know, being in print media, you understand the challenges that we faced. And so a lot of times when we've had conversations in newsrooms and someone will say, we really need to do a better job with diversity, the answer might be, well, yes, but we've also shrunk, and so it's very difficult, and we aren't doing as much hiring. And, you know, when we hire, unfortunately, we're not getting diverse pools, and all these sort of, you know, excuses for doing the work that's required to do that. And so, you know, we set something up within the network where we have someone who's now in charge of recruiting from the news side instead of relying on the HR side, and we will not approve hires without evidence that there's been a diverse pool looked at. And so it's not simply, and we did have an editor, you know, say, these are the people who applied. Unfortunately, we didn't have any diversity in the pool, and it's, well, that's not acceptable. You can't just say, well, no one applied to work in this particular newsroom that was diverse. Go find some candidates to take a look at. And so we've really improved our numbers simply by having more of those conversations and not letting the excuses of, because of what's going on in our industry and because recruiting is hard, we're not able to do it. And so we're saying, no, we are going to figure out a way to do this.
And it's the same excuses that you hear all over. The excuse that we have so many priorities right now. You tell us what you want us to prioritize. Is it making our revenue targets? Is it making our OKRs? Or do you want to focus on diversity? So they're thinking about it in the wrong way. The way they should be thinking about it is, how do we leverage diversity to really drive innovation and to drive business results?
I was just going to say that I love that, holding people accountable at the very beginning of the process, because that happens a lot, and that's what we've learned at CBS. The pool needs to get bigger. If you start with a pool that is non-diverse, of course, the end result. So if you start and you don't have a non-diverse pool, then keep the pool open, until more people come in, or go find them or whatever, but hold it at that place before you move on to the next. It's the only way that you can make a difference.
And of course, how do you attract diverse talent is only a part of the conversation. The other part is, what are you doing with the diversity that you have in your organization right now? How are you grooming them? How are you investing in them? How are you making sure that they realize they have a career path within your organization?
You make a really good point, because I do think that for as much as we are concerned about attracting more diversity, the diversity that's within our organizations often gets sidelined. And so what are some creative ways that we should be thinking about, retaining that talent and making sure that that talent stays in-house and doesn't get frustrated by the process?
It has to be an organization-wide effort. Because that is exactly what happens a lot of times. We bring young people into a big organization and they get lost. They feel isolated. I hear it all the time when you're talking to them, how do I and how can I? And as an organization at CBS News, we've now said, this happens and we've got to counter it. Being at NABJ is just one part of that. We have dozens of people here. I don't know, it might be 75, 80 people here at NABJ. A lot of them are young people, because we want them to see what's possible and to get be at the family reunion. A lot of us started here. So you get a little bit of that. But then when we go back to, it's a matter of watching out for them in the organization. We've started institutes so that they can take classes. We've started something called the Wisdom Series so that we teach each other, mentoring kinds of programs, but really looking out and understanding that it's a problem and talking about it in the management ranks. So holding managers accountable for those people who are in the corners of the room, because culturally we're different. People of color we're taught, keep your head down and work hard. Just do the best job you can do, and somebody is going to see it. And that's not the way it goes. You do have to keep your head down and work hard, but you've got to lift your head up and go and talk to this one, and you have to, get out and know who your managers are, and get out of your comfort zone and go out sometimes with the crowd. There are a lot of things that you have to do in addition to that culturally we don't know. So those of us who do know need to share that. But, managers of color and not of color need to understand that they have to recognize that and bring those young people in.
And we have a similar approach as well. We like to focus on the trifecta, and we're learning to kind of focus on it and concentrate on it a little bit more. So it's, again, how do you invest in your employees through a leadership development program? But more than just that, how do you create an opportunity for our employees to actually apply the learning? What type of stretch assignment do you give? What type of rotational assignment do you give? And making sure that you have an overlay of sponsorship, that you have somebody with influence that will be able to have an impact on this person's career. And those three work well. We believe learning and development by itself isn't necessarily enough. Let's not use learning development or development programs as a way to pacify our employees. During the review process, you take a look, like, all right, I'm not ready to give this person a raise or a promotion, but let me just drop them in a development program, and this way I don't have to hear anything for a year. Got to do more than just that.
We have a program within the network. We've partnered with the Poynter Institute for a program we call Emerging Leaders, and that's very much about trying to help people understand the paths in their career and where they can go. And so we're in our third year of that. We have a 97% retention rate, and almost every person is diverse in that program, and almost every person has gotten a promotion. Certainly having managers that represent the staff so that people understand the path that they can go on is critically important. And so, it's certainly all aspects of the organization, but we've tried to really put a focus on helping with mentorship programs and other things, because we do tend to lose a fair number of people between, within their first year, between year 1 and 2. And so we know there's a lot more work we need to do to ensure that that talent stays with us and that they see a path for where they can go with us.
That's awesome. One more question before we go to Q&A with the audience. Just curious about data and the importance of data and metrics in terms of, getting the continued support for D&I programs. What has been your experience in that? How often do you, does the executive level expect to see certain, measurements in order to evaluate whether or not a D&I program is being successful or not? Yeah.
I think it's critically important. Everything that we do really relies on the data. I think that's how you get the attention of executives, to really talk to them about what the numbers are saying. It's more than just, oh, you're feeling good about what's going on in your department, or just look around, I think I have a diverse department. What are the numbers saying? Are we moving forward? Are we making progress? So we look at the diversity data, we take a look at employee engagement scores, we have roundtables, we take a look to see how many people are participating in ERGs. So all of that tells a story, but in addition to the data, let's go get some qualitative information. And it's more than just diversity, it's more than just having people around the table that look different. Are people feeling comfortable bringing their authentic self into work? Or do people feel as if I'm being hired for difference, but I'm really being kept for conformity? You're not really going to benefit from all of the benefits of diversity if people aren't feeling comfortable to speak up.
Absolutely.
What he said. I mean, it's all about the numbers. It really is. But in addition to the data, because that is really important. You have to. I'm always asking, what percentage? Where are we? How are we? Because the organization is so large, I can't see everybody and everything. So you really do have to keep up. Are you making real progress? Because some people leave and, there's attrition, all kinds of things. So you could, you close your eyes for a minute and the next year you're back to where you started. If you're not, like you said, stay woke on that issue. So you have to do that. The other thing, though, is, diversity. I try to also explain to people above me and below me that diversity is an emotional kind of issue for many people of color, and not just black people and brown people. It's an emotional kind of issue because of where we are in America right now, because of the kinds of stories we're covering constantly. The kinds of reminders that we're being given every day about who we are and what we should be, and the kinds of conversations we're having to have in our newsrooms, they become very emotional because we have sons and daughters who have to deal with this, and mothers and it's a hard thing, and they have to understand that for young people coming into our organization, we have to take a lot of care to nurture them because they're coming in with all of that. And so they don't know how to, they haven't been in the business 30 years like I have, and I can, walk out of that, or really speak my mind to whoever, or say, wait a minute, we can't do that. They don't feel comfortable with all of that. So they are going home with all of this stuff. And so we really have to reach out to them and make them feel part of the conversation, make them feel like they are valued, invite them to, ask them to. I was telling one of our people in one of our bureaus, like, well, we don't understand, we're so open and so nice. And I said, sometimes it's as simple as if you go over to a group of people and you say to only certain ones, hey, how are you doing? And the other ones are sitting there and you don't, direct conversation at them, it makes you feel isolated. It's just like when you're a kid. That doesn't feel good. Even if your work is excellent, that doesn't feel good. So you have to start thinking about how people feel as well. So the data is important, but you also have to think about how emotional this issue is. It's so real that so many people have to live with it every day, and we have to do a better job of understanding that.
Amalia, do you face the same challenges in the newsroom between just understanding, people's need to be understood, as well as needing to understand like the data and the facts and what actually is real in the newsroom.
Sure, and I think one of the things, it is really important to share the data as well so that people have an understanding of where you're at. I don't think it's something that we did a good enough job of tracking. I mean, I know it's not. At this point, throughout our 109 newsrooms, we've centralized it so that all hiring requests come up through me from the news side. And so once a week, I get a chance to look at all of those requests and see where we're at from a diversity standpoint. They go to my boss, the president of the network. We won't make hires again if we can't see evidence that they've been looked at from a diversity standpoint. I've started looking in the last 6 months or so at how many people are leaving our company every week as well, and what the diversity of that group looks like and what we can do from a standpoint. So our recruiting folks, our HR folks are working on trying to come up with some programs to look at what are some of the themes of the people that are leaving, how do we retain them. Right now we're at 26% persons of color in our management ranks across our local network, which is progress from where it was. We need to get farther along. And so I think, being able to have those conversations, I think a lot of times we're afraid to have conversations about this, and so that isolates people within the room. In a lot of our newsrooms, we have diversity committees that have been safe spaces to bring up conversations, to talk about things, to run things by people. Is this sensitive language or not? Is this appropriate for us to talk about? How do we get into this issue and that sort of thing? And so I think, continuing to have those conversations and not being afraid to do that is something that we really need to focus on. So looking at the data is so critical. And then what do you do with it? How do you disseminate it? What conversations do you have from there?
All right. I think this is be a good time for us to now open it up to the audience and take some questions from the audience. And I see some hands raised already. I don't know if we have a mic is coming around.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olivia Winslow. I'm a reporter for Newsday, which is a paper in Long Island, New York. I'm an investigative reporter. I'm not a politics reporter, nor do I want to be one, but I am a rapt consumer of political news. So you're talking about diversity, bringing in a diverse staff, and you would hope from that, I think, to have diverse story ideas. And so as I'm reading and watching news accounts of the political race, what I see is almost a cliche. That is the story of the white working class Trump voter in the Midwest, and what do you think about Trump now? I could understand that in 2016, but we're 3 years out from that. And I just read something this week where a news outlet sends a reporter to Youngstown, Ohio, and if I'm remembering that story correctly, that is a majority-minority area. If there's anyone from Ohio in here, if that's incorrect, please correct me, but that's what I remember from the story. But the news outlet chose to focus on a white working class person that supports Trump. So I'm looking for, what are you doing in your newsrooms to broaden the story in this crucial election year coming up?
That's exactly why diversity is so important in this presidential election as that comes up. I'll give you an example just this week, the El Paso story. There are two examples in the last week that I can give you for CBS. The El Paso story. We have, one of our senior producers is Puerto Rican, Javier Guzman, and we have a unit called Eye on America, and one of the producers, Angel Canales, is also Puerto Rican. They're from New York. When we were talking about how do we get at this story from the real perspective, not just standing out there at Walmart. And they came back, we sent them down there, and they came back with a story and told me something I didn't know, that when things like this happen in Mexican communities, they have what's called a charla, which is people going into somebody in the neighborhood's home to eat and talk about what just happened. And they let our cameras in, and we got raw conversation about what was really, how that community really felt about that attack. I chalk that up as a big win, just for so many reasons. I would have never known to go even look for that. But we had people in our newsroom who knew how to look for it. Not only that, but went down there, found it, and got our cameras into it. And therefore, we put on a piece last night that exposed all of America to it. That's a win. That is why you have diversity around the table. We also just did a story 5 years after Ferguson, a big police investigation to find out, okay, after Ferguson, all these police departments went through implicit bias training. Does it work? Who's doing it? It was one black producer, male, in our newsroom who brought that story idea to us. Is he here, Jonathan? Are you in the room? No. Who brought that story to us about a year and a half ago. And all kinds of roadblocks, were put in his way. Oh, we don't have money to get the right people to do the research on that. Oh, we can't, all kinds of things that just are part of the normal business, all kinds of other stories happening. We're spending money on this and that. And he stayed dogged on that. And when we did the story 2 days ago, it's been 3 days, several parts a day, every day on CBS This Morning and CBS Evening News. And even me, like he was in my office, Kim, I really want to do this, help me do this. Okay, I'm trying to help and I've got a million other things, but he stayed on that. And when that story came on, the level of reporting and the importance of that reporting because of one gentleman in our newsroom that made such a tremendous difference. Because the bottom line is, 57% of police departments that we asked did start this training. 0% know there's no data around whether it's working or not. So they haven't, we did it. We don't know if it's working or not. Nobody's even watching it. Then we talked to white and black police officers who said it just made it worse. Because what it did was reinforce stereotypes. We didn't think that it worked. Nobody asked us if it worked. In Ferguson, we had a black police officer who said, please, there are, white nationalists in our police department. Have you seen their Facebook posts? Like, it was so eye-opening and revealing because of one person. So it's not, you can't hit it every time. There are still times that I go and look at an edit bay and go, wait a minute. Isn't this a story about such and such? Like you said, aren't we supposed to be in majority black town, then why don't we have any black or brown voices in this story? There are times that I still have to do that, but I count that as a blessing. That's why I'm there, to say that before that goes on the air or make us go back and look at it again. So it's an ongoing thing, and I think you should, call out your network, your networks. Call me out if you see it and say, wait a minute, you got it wrong on that. Like that, we have to just get better.
I see more hands raised here in the front.
Hi, I'm sorry, I lost my voice, so my voice is a little weird. My name is Lennox. I'm a student at Simmons University, and I was thinking about what the person from Uber said about intersecting identities, and I was wondering about what diversity measures you use to ensure that it's not a room full of simply just like straight and like cisgender, able-bodied people. Because a lot of the times we look at diversity as like the norm, like bodies that are already privileged in a certain group. And I was just wondering like what is being done about like ensuring that they're disabled voices at the table, queer voices at the table, like single mother voices at the table, just like other groups that usually aren't brought into a circle. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So we have specific outreach that we do to demographics that may require a little bit more attention. So we have outreach to the LGBTQ community as well as with people with disabilities. We had a disability mentoring day a couple of months ago. We constantly partner with different organizations that will be able to connect us with certain communities, and it's more than just going to a conference and sponsoring a dinner. It's how do you really build a relationship throughout an entire year to really engage with the community so you could learn from one another and bring people in so that we could have those conversations. One of the things that we're looking to spearhead as well is a self-ID. really encouraging people to leverage self-ID for us to know who's within our organization. Again, a lot of this information is voluntary, so you can't necessarily see the information, but we try to encourage people to know that we want you to bring your authentic self into work. We also leverage our ERGs as well. So we have an ERG for neurodiversity, and they do outstanding work regarding mental health and the importance of taking care of that. We really make sure that we focus on intersectionality as well. We focus on the 4 C's for our ERGs overall in terms of 4 pillars that we'd like them to focus on. One being career, community, culture, and commerce. We encourage them to work on projects that hit those 4, and if you could do 3, that's great. Partner with another ERG, so you'll be able to hit more of those pillars as well. So we push and we encourage intersectionality so that we can have those important conversations.
All right. Next question.
Hi, my name is Miriam Leger. My family's from Haiti, and I work at...
Sac passe.
Oh, gade. Pa connais pou parler créole là. Sorry. So sorry. I had to go in, family. So I've been an associate director at ESPN for almost 20 years, and most of my time is in a control room. And I was in the control room about a year ago, and it was a baseball story. And it had to do with boats and travel and baseball. And a lot of Dominicans and Haitians come from Haiti in shark-infested waters to the United States to play baseball. So the producers, and I said there's really no diversity, I'm the only African-American woman in my control room. And I said, hey, I don't think this is a good idea because for cultural reasons, I won't get into the whole story. So the producer, to his credit, thought about it, and then he called the EP and said, hey, we have this story. Miriam was saying that, she feels a kind of certain way about it. So I said, it's up to you. I'm just giving you my diverse and cultural, not just black perspective, but my cultural perspective. And he said, we're going to redo that segment because we're not live, we're live to tape. And they redid it. All the panelists said, thank God, we felt uncomfortable about doing that story. So my question to you is, while he changed it because he knows me for like over 20 years, and he was afraid because he just didn't want backlash, how do I change the culture? Because what I need him to do is care. I need to get a deeper connection that he thinks that, we're going to get backlash from that. So I find that my issue, because diversity is one of the platforms I participate in at ESPN, how do I get them to feel differently, to make it more personal?
Amalia, would you like to take that one on?
Well, I can speak to sort of just, obviously it's having people that reflect those communities and helping to understand the different cultures. I mean, I could just speak to an experience I had that really sort of exemplified to me the importance of diversity and how we don't see things that other people with different cultures see. And when I was in the Detroit Free Press newsroom, we were doing 50 years later from the riots that they had had in there. And one of the designers who was there was white, had chosen a photo to put on the front page of the package, and it was artistically a very nice photo of a police officer sort of overlooking an intersection. And one of the editors who was there, who's African American, said, I don't like this photo. To me, this represents, the reason that this happened was police brutality. And the way that this photo is shown makes it look like this police officer is some sort of hero, overlooking this intersection. And so some other people got into the conversation, and the people who were white didn't necessarily see it, but there was a really good listening session that went on where people just didn't see the different aspects of it, changed the photo, got everything going. But if there hadn't been those voices in the room, and so there was certainly no desire to not reflect or understand, but it was just such a different understanding that really helped sort of illustrate that, wow, we really need these, we need to have all kinds of different perspectives and voices in the room, and for people to feel comfortable saying that, not for someone to be able to say, I don't like that photo, but I don't feel like I have the authority to say, please switch that, or the voice to be able to have that in the room. And it was just a learning moment in terms of helping to try to understand. And so I think about that a lot in terms of how do we foster that on a more regular basis, and how do we have those conversations and make people feel comfortable, like you did enough so to raise a hand to say this is an issue, and so how do we help resolve that? And so I think things like diversity committees and other things help with that, but I think that there's a lot more work that needs to be done.
And we leverage our we leverage our ERGs just for that reason. That's the commerce piece. So we will bring things in front of our ERGs and say, before we roll out this product, what do you think about it? So we'll go to our BOLD, our Black employee ERG, or we'll go to our Latino, or we'll go to our neurodiversity. And it's great to hear the different perspectives for all of the reasons why we are articulating it. We all have different filters, different baggage that we bring, so we see things differently. And we actually leverage the advice that we get from our ERGs. It's more than just going to hear it. And again, it's risk mitigation. It's one of those things where, all right, some people do view it that way. The decision might be to move forward anyway, but at least you know what you're up against. And people feel comfortable enough to bring it up. So that's two-part. One, you have people around the table. Two, that they feel comfortable to speak up about it.
Yeah, you said make them care. I don't know if you can make them care, but movements are made by courageous people. And it's time for us to be courageous in our newsrooms and bring up things that make us uncomfortable. Otherwise, they really won't know, So we have to speak up. And we can't say just because you did it once, if it happens again, speak up again. That makes me uncomfortable. Or here's why I think we should think about this. You know why. You know how it makes you feel. And to their point, you may not always win the argument, but it will make you feel better that you brought it up. Don't go home with it. A lot of times we start having these side conversations. Well, that wasn't right. Or look at how that's not doing.
They did it again.
That's not helping at all. You have to go and talk to people about what makes you uncomfortable. You have every right to do that, and you should.
Yeah, I think that's the inclusion piece. If you don't feel like you're included in the conversation, that's when employees begin to feel disengaged. And that, organizations, the country loses billions of dollars every year from employees who are disengaged. Those are the employees that retire in place. They're like, okay, you don't really want to hear my opinion anyway. All right, I'm going to just show up. I'm going to just do the minimum. I'm going to get through the day. And, that doesn't help anybody.
Hi. So, Ram, just to add on to the point that you just made, in the situations where you are trying to advocate and create a more diverse environment, but the seat or the table that has already been prepared is not diverse at all, and those people have been in those positions, and maybe they may not plan on leaving, what do you do in those situations to bring diversity to that scenario?
So again, just to rephrase the question, what happens with certain opportunities or certain departments where there's pockets of opportunity to bring more diversity? Yes. Yeah. So again, it's, leadership, having the conversation with leadership, going through the data and talking about what are the opportunities in different departments. Because again, when you take a look at an organization, one of the reasons why I love my job is that I get to travel across the organization and identify best practices. And when I find a best practice, you try to leverage it across the entire org, but it doesn't always work like that. You can't use a cookie cutter formula. So one department might be doing well with gender diversity. Another one might be doing great with ethnic diversity. They might be an opportunity to make sure that there's more people participating in ERGs with another department. But finding out what those pockets of opportunities are and coming up with a customized plan for that particular business unit. And the best thing that I've seen is after I sit down and I meet with the leader, they come back to me with their plan in terms of, this is how I'm going to leverage the arsenal of what we discuss to see how I can move the needle, and let's regroup on this, every other month so we see how things are moving forward. And again, I think executives just in general like to be competitive. There's nothing that brings more focus to a room when you pull up everybody's numbers to see who's doing well and who has green arrows, and look for year-over-year growth. That's moving in the right direction.
A good idea is a good idea, too. So bring solutions. Try to help with how we can do it better. Bring an idea about how the company can get better, how the manager can hire more people, find more people. And that's not, it's not your individual responsibility. It is the company's responsibility. But I do take it personally. And, I wasn't always an EVP, but even at wherever I am, at whatever level I am, I'm going to fight from there. And everybody can do that.
Everybody can do that. I remember at CBS, we have an internship program, which you come and it used to be before the laws changed, you work for free, and no one could come to New York. Who can afford, what person of color at, the university where I graduated at, Florida A&M University, could come and live in New York for 3 months? These kids didn't have money, the church was sending them to school. I went to the CEO and made a business case for why we needed to have scholarships that paid for housing for a certain number of students every year, because it was good for CBS and good for those kids. We would never have other interns from Florida or from Oklahoma or from anywhere else except New York if we didn't reach out to those kids and pay for them to come. And now we're 7 or 8 years in, and many of those kids now have been hired at CBS like it just was an idea. And so many of you can find those same kinds of ideas or present those same kinds of ideas. And you know what? That costs $50,000 a year for big old CBS. That's nothing, to bring in 7 or 8 kids and pay for everything for them so that they can have the opportunity. And we get those voices. I mean, everybody doesn't live on the East Coast. So what do the kids in Oklahoma City think about how we should cover a story or what our internship project should be? And so it's benefited the entire organization.
I think the important part of that story is when something's important to an organization, they put resources towards it. So it's time, it's personnel, and it's funding. And when you find things that's important like that, petition for that.
I wish we could go on for like another hour, honestly, but we can't, unfortunately. We have to end here. So I just want to thank our panel of guests for this incredible conversation. Thank you for joining us. And as you guys exit the stage, I'm going to introduce our next special program. Now, we want to turn now to focus on a time 30 years ago. It was 1998, 1999. The late, great Toni Morrison, whom we just lost this week, had won a Pulitzer Prize for Beloved that year. The hit song Parents Just Don't Understand by DJ Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince won the first ever Grammy Award for Best Rap Performance. And Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing hit the theaters with Public Enemy's song Fight the Power.
And now, please welcome to the stage from ESPN's The Undefeated, Kelly Carter.
Thank you. Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing was so impactful during that time period with an in-your-face message about race relations, gentrification, and police brutality. And many of these same issues persist today. Today we have a jam-packed panel ready to jump in. Please, if you can, hold your applause until the end of introductions. We begin with the president at Purple Pictures, movie producer Hadeel Reda, author, actor, and activist Hill Harper, general manager of TV One, Michelle Rice, and general manager of Aspire TV, Melissa Ingram. And finally, we have Miss America, Nia Franklin. The tragic death of Radio Raheem and Do the Right Thing was based on the death of New York graffiti artist Michael Stewart back in 1983. The scene and the emotions still ring true today. So I want to start here with my panel. I'm going to join you guys in a second, but how do you think that films have evolved in the time, in the last 30 years since Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing? Let's just kind of go down the line and have everyone weigh in on that, please.
I think it's come a long way, but only really in the past maybe 3 or 4 years I've seen more of the sea change. And I think that was really when the Academy was forced, and as the panel before us was talking about, you have to have a plan. It has to be an intention. And when they really had to start looking at Black Lives Matter, Black stories, and putting them on the same level as the other films, it's when it became more commercial and mainstream.
You know, I think I have a little different take. I really believe that we've regressed. The quality of the storytelling, the quality of the writing, the quality of the acting. Do the Right Thing is, I believe, one of the top 5 films ever made, period.
Yeah.
Across genre.
Yeah.
Right? And Spike did not win an award for that film, but he won an award for Black Klansman, which I don't know what your opinions are of that film, but it's just not a good movie, right? It's a movie, it's a film that is it's a step and fetch it version, and unfortunately, we had a time where we had Matty Rich, you had Spike Lee, you know, you had Ted Witcher, who did Love Jones, you know, John Singleton. You had these wonderful filmmakers that were doing extremely aggressive, courageous work that, like anything else, I believe over time, the industry beats you down and you end up becoming a bad version of yourself, kind of like Al Pacino acting these days, right? He's perhaps one of the greatest actors ever, but you watch him act now and he's just doing an imitation of himself, right? And unfortunately, that's where we are. Now, there are some exceptions. Ava DuVernay and the work that she's doing is certainly an exception.
Right.
But for the most part, if you look at our filmmaking, in quality, I believe it's regressed.
Right. Thank you for that.
Yeah, in many ways, I definitely agree with that. I think the word that you hit on for me was courageous. When I think about that movie, it's definitely in my top 10 as courageous storytelling. The regression really is big studio, sort of mainstream movies, but you do see some resurgence of that courageous spirit in making content because of different platforms. So while financing is still a big issue for us, to the extent that you don't have to, think about or be told what to do, or to be told how to tame your voice by a studio, then you see the courageous spirit that we saw in that movie. And so having a network that's a Black network, like TV One, like Aspire, and other networks out there, and other platforms like Netflix and these other platforms, that's when you'll start to see people be able to use their courageous voices. But when you're dealing with the mainstream, you're still seeing, just our images are not authentic.
Right.
And our stories are not being told in our voice because we don't necessarily have the power and the courage to stand up and do that when we're not financing it ourselves.
Okay. Thank you for that.
So I will preface my comments by saying I was 9 when that movie came out. So I can't really speak to the magnitude of the influence back then. But as an adult, when I watch that film, I'm actually inspired, and I say, wow, Spike actually created a genre. I mean, he really did, that I think has really shaped, to Michelle's point, a lot of filmmakers now, this whole a concept of authenticity, right? And rooting your content in truth. And so you see a lot of young filmmakers that are coming up that may not be, to Michelle's point, mainstream yet, but you see a lot of, because now everybody's a filmmaker. You got a phone, you're a filmmaker. You're capturing content. And so we see, I think, a lot of emerging artists coming up that have been inspired by what Spike actually taught us to do, which is to be authentic, to root your story in truth. And I think we're going to see more of it. I mean, I understand the point about regression, but like I said, I can't speak to that time. I just see that there's the inspiration and the influence of Spike today in some of the younger filmmakers.
Similarly to you, I was not able to see that film when it came out. I was not conceived yet. Probably wasn't even thought about yet. But
Me too.
But seeing those clips just now, it really makes me emotional to see those things because we're seeing them now. And so it raises a question, have we really progressed? And when I think of movies that I really love that are Black films, even though this film was not directed by a person of color, The Color Purple was written by an African-American woman, and it's one of my favorite books, one of my favorite films. And when I watched that movie, which is one of my top 3 favorite movies, that movie inspires me because it shows Black people rising in their own way, even though that was a hard movie to watch too, with the things that were going on in it, the way that we were treated in the movie. And so I really think we have a long way to go, and I do appreciate filmmakers such as Ava DuVernay and even my own peers that are out here trying to make films. And it really motivates me as a composer because I want to help, even though I'm not a filmmaker, I want to help tell those stories through music. And so I just really am inspired, and I'm interested to see what happens over the next 30 years, especially in regards to us telling our own stories, and hopefully the narrative changes. Because right now, the reality is we are still not seen as equals to some people in this country, and I'm really hoping that changes.
Thank you guys for all those answers. This next question is for, I guess Michelle and Melissa probably could speak best to this, but if anyone feels compelled, please jump in. Would love to hear you talk about the change in opportunity for minority projects. How far have we come, and what hurdles are still remaining?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just spoke to the fact that the biggest hurdle is financing. One of the biggest, financing and opportunity. There are so many content creators out there who have great projects. We have difficulty getting our projects financed, but again, we're talking large platforms. Anybody can be a content creator. You can create a YouTube channel. So there are a lot more opportunities in terms of getting your content out there. If you look at someone like Issa Rae, who started with a YouTube channel, and she has a show on HBO, and now she's become a person who is mentoring and bringing lots of voices. So there are a lot of different avenues now, that there are so many different platforms for content that I think give opportunity to creators, but still in terms of getting, the big deals, we still have issues. And then again, keeping authentic to who you are, being a creative who is able to create content and stay authentic to who you are, is still difficult. I mean, Kenya Barris had to leave ABC because they had a dispute over not airing an episode that he wanted to air one way. End of the story, he's now at Netflix with a $100 million deal. That worked out for him.
Right.
But again, he had to go outside of sort of mainstream, a mainstream platform to a Netflix. And, you know, kudos to them for giving that opportunity to him and to Ava. And so we do see these opportunities, but again, Shonda Rhimes, it's few and far between. What are we doing to really help the everyday content creator? But I definitely challenge creators in the room to go out there and put your content out on the internet, and that's one way to get your voice, your authentic voice, heard. And we are out there. We look at creators on the internet all the time. We are sourcing content. We're using that to give young voices opportunities for shows that we're doing on TV One and Clio TV.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you know, I think it's, I think Michelle hit it on the head. I think one of the things I would challenge us to do is there aren't enough Aspire TVs and TV Ones and BET, right? I think we could have more places for us by us. So that is a hurdle. And that is because of financing. I think another issue and a hurdle that we as a people need to sort of be better at is supporting those spaces and supporting those platforms that are for us and by us. Because oftentimes it is the viewership that drives the revenue. It is the viewership that drives the revenue that allows us to create more content. And so oftentimes you'll hear things of, well, why aren't you guys doing this show? And you should be committed to this and to that. Well, oftentimes it's not being watched. And so therefore shows get canceled. And so understanding sort of the economics behind how this content gets financed and how these platforms like TV One and Aspire stay in business, I think is a hurdle that we need to do better about educating our people on.
Absolutely. Hadeel, did you want to jump in there? I felt you kind of...
I do, and I guess there's a couple of things here, and I understand what everybody's talking about in terms of the actual stories being told, but from my perspective, in the indie world, you know, there's been such a huge effort by casting directors that when they can put a person of color in a role, they do it. And they will fight the producer and they will fight the financier, because what needs to happen is we need to start seeing people of color in heroic roles. And it has to be not because of their race that they are in that role. It needs to become something that's just normal, so that people get used to that diversity in all of their content. So I understand the storytelling of our stories, but then there's also just the integration of color in everything that we do, so it doesn't become, oh, I have to hire a black person here because of this. No, you can hire a black person, a Chinese person, or whoever, make an effort to diversify your cast,
right,
so that the audience is getting used to that. I mean, that has to be part of it. You know, it's like when we used to have Aaron Spelling TV series, and you wouldn't see one black face on those shows. Right. And now you're seeing shows on Netflix for kids, and it's very diverse. And it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be related to their race or color. They're just characters.
Yeah.
And that can win. To pick up on that, you know, our mutual friend, Gabrielle Union, is a very good friend of mine. She was, first season, she was watching my show, The Good Doctor. She called me up and she said, you know, I'm ashamed to say this, but it takes me, I have to think about it because your show is so diverse. You know, there's two Asian leads, it's an autistic guy, there's me, my character, another African-American female. It is the most diverse show on TV. It also, 2 weeks ago, got named the most watched show in the world. We're the #1 show in the world.
Congratulations.
So diversity works. Yeah. You know, we're more watched worldwide than we are in the U.S. In other words, 50 million viewers a week worldwide.
Wow.
So it's the #1 show. But the point is, it's so diverse. Gabrielle said, I kept saying to myself, where are the white people besides the autistic guy,
Right.
And she said, you're so used to seeing a show like Friends or Seinfeld or whatever show, where there's that one person of color or they sprinkle in a few,
Yeah.
or you have a show that is all black,
Right.
or fresh off the boat, all Asian.
Yeah.
So it's either all or nothing or a sprinkle, right? Rather than just a real potpourri in that sense. And so there's good business sense to it, I believe, as well as it's really what the world looks like. You go to a hospital today, you see the Filipino nurse, the black nurse,
Yeah.
they are diverse.
Yes.
In real life, the real representation.
That's amazing. And again, congratulations. That's really fantastic news. Let's swing shift a little bit, and I want to talk about films and how they, in many cases, like When They See Us, and certainly in documentaries like Surviving R. Kelly, they spark change and even legal action. Is this the next generation in the Do the Right Thing movement? Is that the new evolution that we're seeing right now?
I'll jump in. I think these are films that have come out in the 21st century, and I think millennials have definitely paid a great deal of attention to these issues. And I feel that within my generation, not completely, but I do feel like we are more socially aware than the generations that have come before us. And so I do think when we watch these films, it's like, this happened. When people sometimes don't even believe these things have really happened. And so seeing them in a way that is being shown on TV or shown in a way that's scripted, it really opens people's eyes, and that is going to help to create change, in my opinion. And that's why these films are so important, and they do have to keep being told. These authentic stories need to keep being told.
And let's be clear, scripted shows are watched more. I mean, there's a wonderful documentary about the Central Park Five, but it's a spectacular documentary.
Right.
And if you watch that, you'd be up in arms, right? But it took When They See Us to actually create that wave, right?
Yeah.
And so the documentary didn't do it.
Right.
And I'm not saying that's right.
Sure.
I'm just saying that is reality, that folks will watch scripted when it's presented them in a way rather than the real thing.
Right.
Right.
No, that's fantastic. And audience, just so you know, get your questions prepared because I'm going to come to you guys in a little bit. But let's stay there with what you just said, Hill, and something that Nia just said. Does some of what we're seeing right now, can we attribute that to social media? Twitter didn't exist 30 years ago. And so there wasn't a viral movement that could have happened to affect some of the change that we see. The reason why probably a documentary like Surviving R. Kelly got the eyeballs that it got was probably because of the social media space and what was happening. And people were able to go back and watch maybe the first chapters and catch up and kind of talk about these things. Same with When They See Us. I mean, that was such a social media movement. There were, kids who were not around when that was happening that were learning about that for the first time with the Netflix series. But does social media help play a space in that, or what is that like?
Yeah, I do think, this sort of new wave of sort of social activism in film, themes in films, is being fueled or supported through social media. My daughter didn't know anything about R. Kelly, but literally, she's the one that dragged me to watch it. I was like, I don't want to watch a show about R. Kelly.
Right.
But she dragged me to the TV because she had been seeing the hashtags and hearing about the story. And I sat down. Of course, I got sucked into it. But yeah, I do think that millennials and generations even behind, she's not a millennial, she's younger, are being impacted by things that they are seeing through social media, and like I said, she brought me into the fold on that particular program. But the same thing with Ava DuVernay's documentary, and I'm going back to what you said earlier, documentaries don't necessarily do well, especially on mainstream tech. We would love to show a ton of documentaries. There are 1,000 amazing stories, but we also have to make money. And so when we can create this wonderful documentary, but if no one watches, we can't keep the lights on. And that's, a problem when on any given day of the week, every Tuesday, we sit down and look at ratings. On any day of the week, Love and Hip Hop is the top-rated film around the top-rated television program among African Americans.
Right.
So it's just a challenge for all of us of how do we really create good television and tell these authentic stories, and still we're running a business. But it really truly is important to us to be authentic and be a voice in this community that matters with quality programming.
Right.
But when you see what folks are watching on television, you would be shocked, and maybe you wouldn't.
And I'll say for good or for bad, social media is now our CNN, our ABC. I mean, we go there for news before, and oftentimes the news hits there before it does hit television.
Right.
And so I think, let's be honest, I think that's how Ava made the film. Was she was contacted through social media by one of the Central Park Five who was like,
that's
you should make
absolutely
a
correct. Yeah.
And that's how it happened. So I think we're going to continue to see more of that, and social media being a hub, right, of people connecting and telling and sharing stories.
Right.
And you've got such big influencers, right? I mean, we've known this for years, that Black people, we influence everything. But now we actually have data behind it. Black Twitter, right? Sean King and those sort of people who are out there who are telling the stories and basically keeping us woke.
Right.
That's then sparking these sort of filmmakers like Ava DuVernay to make these rooted in true stories like Spike did 30 years ago.
And you can even look at what happened with Black Panther and the success of Black Panther. That was something that was a viral social media campaign that ended up, $1 billion later, $1 billion plus later, it's the first all-Black film to kind of cross that barrier, and a lot of that was probably attributed to social media campaigns, I would imagine.
But even how something like a hashtag #OscarSoWhite got people to wake up around what was going on in the business. And I think you saw some, attention to that in terms of the next year at Oscars, we saw more movies with people of color. But social media has both played, an important role in advocating for more roles, more people in management, more content in mainstream as well. So,
Fantastic. All right, audience, you're up. I think there's a mic going around in the front up here.
Hi, my name is Tiana Sermons. I'm currently a junior reporter for Time Magazine for Kids, and my question is for you. So what advice would you have for kids? Because there's some times where I'm at events and I'm the only Black person inside the room. So what advice would you have for kids like me about being confident when they're like the only Black person inside of a room?
Well, I can totally relate to you. When I was in sometimes it's still like that. So, well, hopefully we will be doing things to help change that by the time that you are around our ages. But that happened to me a lot when I was little too. I was one of maybe 10 or 15 Black children at my elementary school. And so the way that I kept my confidence up, as you spoke about, is I surrounded myself with groups of people who did look like me so that I could have that encouragement, so that when I was out there in the world where I've had people that didn't look like me, I felt still supported. Even though I was in the room and I was the only one, I could feel the ancestors, I could feel my church family that was an all-Black church, I could feel my parents, I could feel the children's chorus that I was a part of that had more diversity in it. So just continue to surround yourself with your wonderful mom and people who can really lift you up, because you have something special. We all can see it in this room. Anyways, we can already see it. I mean, so when you go into the rooms and maybe you feel like you're the only one, and that's something that you feel like is a bad thing, embrace it and know that you are in the room for a reason, and that you might be the one with the best ideas in the room. So be confident in that and hold your head up high.
Absolutely.
Can I just say this to Tiana? She's such a special girl. Tiana, when you start to run Time Magazine, will you do us all a favor and make a commitment to pay it forward and to make sure that no other little girl has to experience what you experienced, okay? That there'll be people surrounding that young girl that look like her, all right? Okay.
And I'll just piggyback on that too. One thing you can also do is, you're already a junior editor for Time Magazine, so I can't even imagine the other great things you will do. But like she said, like, I just want to really enforce that, like, pay it forward. One thing I'm trying to do right now is, as a female in the music composition world, there aren't a lot of females in the room. Sometimes I'm the only one in the room. I was one of 2 females to graduate from my master's program in music composition, and I was the only black one. And a lot of times I am the only black female in the room. And so I've started a project called Compose Her, where I'm helping to uplift female musicians. So you can do something like that too for girls your age. Maybe there's other junior reporters out there that want to be like you. So try to help encourage them now. You can start that now.
Also, when you're able to, will you hire me? Because that clearly is happening. So impressed. What was I doing at that age? Do we have time for another question? Go up here.
Has anyone seen The Last Black Man in San Francisco?
Yes.
And if so, what do you think it says about progress or the lack thereof since Do the Right Thing?
Has anyone seen that movie, Last Black Man in San Francisco? I saw it. You said you? No?
We've
You've seen it? Oh, okay. I saw it. It premiered at Sundance. I didn't hear the end of your question, though.
What do you think it says about progress or the lack thereof in filmmaking since Do the Right Thing?
Are you guys all looking at me? I mean, I'm someone, because I kind of look at things through a critical lens. I just love seeing new voices introduced in Hollywood, new black voices, to be specific, introduced in Hollywood. The film basically is about, the gentrification and what's happening in, like, the Oakland area, basically in any town USA. Like, I'm from Detroit originally, so it felt very familiar to some of the themes and issues that are happening there. But I love when we get a chance to have new voices introduced. Like Chadwick Boseman, so I cover entertainment, I cover Hollywood for a living, and Chadwick Boseman said this thing to me a couple of years ago that I thought was so great and so obvious, and he was saying that there can be a lot of Chris's. There can be Chris Pine, there can be, there can be a lot of white guys who get invited into the Hollywood space, but we have this kind of, there can only be one mentality, I think, when it comes to black actors and black filmmakers and so on and so forth. So I love the value add of having some new voices in Hollywood to pay attention to. And yes, Brad Pitt is one of the producers of that film, but I think I love that a lot of people didn't necessarily know that, because I do think that as an advocate, basically, for black filmmakers and black voices in Hollywood, I think he understands the importance of writing the check and hanging back and letting other people kind of have a voice. So I thought that was kind of important. Thank you for that question. We had another one up here in the front.
So I grew up watching Jackie Reed on BT News, and that was why I decided I wanted to go into broadcast journalism in college. Her and seeing faces like Ananda Lewis. Ananda Lewis. I think I read recently that there is maybe only one, if any, black news programs on our channels. So for Melissa and Michelle, at what point do you have that conversation between we're going to support this program because that's what brings the ratings and the money, but also we're going to, also support maybe a news program or, something that's a little bit more for the culture when it doesn't necessarily make sense from a ratings point? Is that conversation being had or that support there?
Well, we did it. I mean, we had News One Now with Roland Martin on the air for 7 years, and before that, we had him on with Watch It and Watch. And I mean, we did it as long as we could. Again, so those are things that you definitely have to balance. At the end of the day, you are running a business. There are other ways. For us, and the broad distribution that a network like a CNN, which is over 100 million homes, versus TV One, which is a niche network, which is in 57 million homes, is not sustainable to have a daily news program. And so we look at other ways. There's, our digital assets through our company, I1 Digital. We still have News One Now through digitally. So there are other ways and other business models that we have to look at providing content like that that's more viable for us as a network. So cable networks and the business model and the smaller audiences that we have, it's just not a sustainable. It's not sustainable for a daily news show.
And Aspire TV is in a unique position where we aren't Nielsen rated, so we aren't necessarily tied to the ratings right now. And so we have been able to make some commitments to things that historically have not rated on other networks. One is HBCU Sports and Lifestyle, right? We know that other networks, and I believe even TV One at one point may have had HBCU Sports, BET has had in the past, and that just hasn't rated. People go to ESPN for that content. People go to CNN for their news. So, but what we've realized is that that is an area that just really doesn't have a home, really doesn't have, and as a Black network, we're making that commitment right now because one, I'm an HBCU grad, so I'm passionate about that. But two, we know how important it is for these HBCU graduates and students and alums to be able to see themselves and to be able to see the culture in which they grew up in. So we're in a unique position, and so for as long as we can, we will continue to try to make that commitment to things that you cannot find anywhere else. But as it relates to the news, I think there are other, like Michelle said, CNN and other places where you can go to get that daily news.
And I think the point that was just made is a fantastic point because look at what can trickle down. It kind of relates, I don't know how many of you guys saw Chris Broussard's rant about the Rich Paul rule, right? So if Aspire can highlight HBCUs and a young brother who's being recruited by all these major white institutions, Duke, UNC, whoever, decides, you know what, I want to go to Hampton and play. I'm going to be one and done anyway, but I'm going to go to Hampton. And then another young brother decides he's going to go to FAMU, another brother, Howard. All of a sudden, you start taking the talent and the money out of these traditionally large white institutions, and that money starts going to HBCUs because we are the talent, right, in this arena. Yet the talent is exposed to Duke, UNC, USC on ESPN, but if they start getting exposed to it here and there's a groundswell that says, hey, you're going to be good at Hampton, it's the same size court, and take Hampton to the tourney. Don't take Duke to the tourney. Let Hampton make those tens of hundreds of millions of dollars by participating in the tourney. It becomes a different mindset and perhaps a different way of encouraging our young players to go be one and done at other institutions, right? But they need a platform to be seen because it's like a tree falling in the woods. Nobody wants to play if no one's watching them, right? So if they don't have the platform to be seen, the beginning of that type of activity wouldn't happen. Does that make sense?
Wow, that's fantastic. Another question? I see a hand up over here.
Hello. Hi, my name is Janae Tate. I'm actually here from Miami, and I have an interesting background in media. I started off as a print journalist and went over to sales at iHeartMedia, and I had a question for the TV executives. What, I guess, was there any packages or are there any initiatives as far as sales when it comes to selling those programs with news? Because I know that when I worked at iHeart, the Black radio station that I represented didn't get the resources put behind it that the white station did. And I noticed that that was a management decision, and I wanted to know if there is a different strategy or what goes on from that level is with your sales team. Are you putting together initiatives so that they can possibly support those news networks and shows? All right.
So I just want to make sure I understand your question. You're asking, is our ad sales team going out there and basically pitching this to particular advertisers as an opportunity to fund, almost like get the production funding for news programming? Is that? I just want to make sure I understand that.
Like, is there an initiative for your sales team to pitch those shows so they could get the sponsorships that they need? Is it, an added focus on it?
Yeah, so again, Aspire's in a unique position because we're not rated. So when we go out and we're selling largely the brand overall, and sponsors aren't buying a particular show. And that's just because we aren't rated at this time, but with everything that we make a commitment to put on our air, our sales team is incentivized and goes out and puts their best foot forward and speaks about it. And we package it in a way to where advertisers understand that when you come and spend with us, right? Yeah, you could spend your dollars on a white network or general market entertainment network, but when you buy with us, you're actually becoming connected to an audience that trusts us. So they're going to be most likely to buy your products when they see your advertisement on our channel because they know they can trust us. We're a Black network, we're for them, we're by them. So I don't know if that answers your question, but our sales team definitely has everything that they need, and it's incentivized to sort of tell that story in a unique way to help us get the sponsorships needed.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree 100%, and more so than in mainstream media, because we don't have hundreds of shows on TV One. So they are absolutely incentivized to sell every single program that we put on the air. Everything that we put on our air, we want to be a hit. And Roland Martin was a big star for us. We think he's an amazing journalist, and so absolutely 100%. Our sales team in their upfronts, that was a huge program for them to go out and sell. We have D.L. Hughley on at nighttime right now. Huge program. Everything that we do, our sales team is incentivized to sell. We want everything on our network to be a hit. That's probably not how broadcast looks at it. They probably have, this show, we're going to put all of our money behind this show. We're going to put all our money. We put all of our money behind every show that we put on the air because it has to work. And that's the way cable operates. It's probably a little different than what you're talking about.
Did I see another hand out there? Oh, right here in the front.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Julia Janae. I'm a reporter with Court TV. And I have a question. It's something that was raised in another panel about things that we've advanced in the past and have slipped behind. There was a mention about an elite high school in New York that only has graduated 1 or 2 African Americans, and years ago it was 300. So it's sometimes when we're seeing these advancements and things that are going on that are great for the community now, but there are behind the scenes things that are slipping. Is there anything in the film and TV industry that you all see that we have actually slipped on and are not as advanced as we used to be?
I can take that one. I do think that one of the things we have slipped on is in terms of the diversity and recruiting. I think that is something that has stepped up. I think the thing we have regressed on is promoting and just the power of really empowering minorities in certain roles after they've been hired, because our business is so power driven by a few people, and so it's really hard to kind of burst through that ceiling. So although we are very conscious in the business of hiring color, we are not very conscious of the voices of those people, and we are not very conscious of ways to promote those people so that there's power gained in those positions to open up for the rest of the voices and these stories to be told. It almost feels like a little bit of a backlash, like we will open those doors, but only to this degree. And that is something that I have noticed, it's the positions that people grow to.
I still see an area there still needs to be more people of color in management, period. And that's to the point that this sister over here made. We get courageous people that are in the operations room. We get a courageous voice that's in marketing. I mean, look at what happened with Pepsi or H&M. If there was a person in the room that said, come on, you don't have the coolest monkey in the jungle, or a person in the room that was able to speak up, in management, it would have never happened. And you're lucky if you get a person as courageous as she was to speak up and have the credibility to be heard. So I think that we are continuing to see that there needs to be more Black people with decision-making, not even people of color, with decision-making power in organizations, in departments that, particularly those that are consumer-facing, in marketing, in programming, so that they can say, this is not authentic, this is not real, this is disrespectful. You need to take another look at this from a cultural lens that I represent. So we're not seeing that still. I think that we still have a long way to go. We've created, voice in our organizations through ERGs and diversity committees, but we need to not just have committees, we need to actually have people in the executive ranks, so that it would never come to the table. I would never bring something to the table that was not culturally respectful. Right. And you'd be lucky if you're in an organization where you have someone that's able to speak up and change that. So we're lucky to have D&I departments and those different things, but we need to get to a place where there are actually people who have authority and decision-making power in those rooms, so that those things are not even be put forth. They start to change and shift the culture.
And one of the areas I've noticed is that if we put the lens on ourselves, we have had a difficulty, and I really don't know why, of really cultivating and seeding new talent. If you look at many of our traditional civil rights organizations, I'm on the board of the Congressional Black Caucus. It is the most dysfunctional board I've ever seen. It's a bunch of old Black people sitting around. They've seeded no new talent. There's no farm team. They've brought nobody along. You look at Rainbow Push, it's about to die. Look at NAACP, it's about to die. Look at SNCC, SCLC. We can go down, Southern Poverty Law Center. We can go down the line. These are organizations where folks hang on to what they got so long without bringing somebody else along, that the organization in and of itself that's meant to protect and promote Black folks is going to perish. And so we literally have to look at ourselves with that and seeding new talent, bringing new talent along, and being able to give it away. Yeah. I'm going to give you the opportunity to learn and fail and succeed, and promote you into a leadership position. Right. One of the places where to tell a good side of a story is Procter & Gamble. They just hit a new high, all-time high with their stock price. My experience with Procter & Gamble this past year was that there are two brother executives that approached me and said, Hill, we're going to do this short film called The Look, about look Black men receive. Will you get behind it, promote it for us? We're going to do this big social media thing. So on my Instagram, you can see it. It's got, 70,000, 80,000, 100,000 views or something like that. And it's just a short film that they did within Procter & Gamble to talk about bias and to promote a conversation about bias. Certainly that does not happen if those young brothers aren't executives of Procter & Gamble, right? But at the same time, I truly believe that Procter & Gamble is doing well because they are hiring this young talent. These are young brothers. These aren't the 70-year-old cats that have been working forever. These are young brothers, smart, very determined, hardworking, doing things. We spoke at it's just a lot of things. They hosted this brunch for all Black men and sons that I did in Brooklyn. They're doing a lot of things that you don't even hear about or see. But I believe that company is successful right now because they're having the foresight to hire young folks who are aggressive, energized, and allowing them to do. Right. Not holding the reins back.
Yeah. So are we seeing that across the board in Hollywood too, because of the success of, we talked about the $1 billion blitz that was Black Panther, and we've talked about, Issa Rae, not only getting her deal with HBO, but then looking back and helping bring other people into the room. Are we seeing that Black folks are leveraging their voices and their power in those ways more in Hollywood spaces too? If so, I'd love to hear you guys maybe talk about that or talk about a trend that maybe you see is happening or what you hope is happening in those spaces.
I think so. Yeah. Even if you just look at Beyonce and what she did at Coachella, like she's paying honor to our culture And I think now more than ever, people are being unapologetically Black. They are not hiding in the corners and not wearing their hair natural to work. I think I'm the first Miss America ever to wear braids during her contract. So people are embracing it and saying, you know, this is our moment. And I don't know, I can't say when exactly I think this happened recently. I mean, I think we've always been proud of who we are, but now more than ever, I just really see us embracing who we are and not feeling like we can't share who we are. I mean, when I was this young lady's age, I don't remember being confidently Black. Right. I remember feeling like I had to fit in or get a perm just in time for my 7th grade school picture. So I don't know if it's just when you kind of grow into yourself as an individual or if it's just the culture. And I mean, you even hear people now saying for the culture. And to me, that means we're doing this because we're proud of who we are and we're not going to, you know, water it down for anybody.
And I think you're definitely seeing more opportunities. I think, you know, growing up, it was BET is the only place for Black stories to be told. Right. That's the only platform. And now you have mainstream platforms, general market platforms like a Netflix that are saying, we got strong Black lead. We understand the value of this audience. Right. And to Hill's point, we just want you to be. We're not going to tell you who to be or how to be. We're just going to accept you for who you are. We'll let you do your thing. We'll fund it. We'll back it because we know you're going to make us money. And you're seeing, I think, that same trend in Hollywood, right? Where it used to be, okay, give us your story. We'll tell it. But now we're actually allowing you to tell your story and we'll fund it because now we really understand that Black people do watch live TV. Black people do go to the movies. Yeah. They do spend more than any other segment. Okay, makes sense. Stuff that we've known for the longest now is actually sort of the spiritual awakening is happening and actually the funding is happening. So I think there's more opportunities and you have HBO with Issa Rae. Aspire picked up one of Issa Rae's shows off of YouTube, right? So she's actually paying it forward and creating other opportunities for her friends. Lena Wyatt, right. You're seeing that same sort of Queen and Slim, right? They're getting the funding to go out and actually tell these stories where it used to be BET was the only place for that to happen.
Okay. Do we have another question in the audience? No? Okay. Well, you know, let's bring it full circle. We started off talking about Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. Here we are in 2019, 30 years later. How can we advance and build on that legacy that he established 3 decades ago? Let's just, again, you know, go down the line and talk about what it is you hope to see moving forward.
Well, I definitely think, you know, to speak to your point, now is the time, and there is this opening for us to speak and be very, very clear and just authentic and real about what we feel and what we believe. And I think no matter what that is, no matter what side of the dialogue things are on, there's something happening right now that now is the time to speak up. Like, all voices are heard. We went from everything from Me Too. It is the time to overthrow that sort of, that shadow of a power that has been there, you know, trying to make us hide in the corners. I think the other thing that's really helped us is social media, because a lot of the things that people just didn't even know was happening, it's posted all over. Right. And there's no place to hide, there's no place to spin. And so the truth is really coming out. So my whole thing now is just to be completely honest, no matter how offensive you think you're going to be or politically incorrect, because it's our time to do that. Because that's the only way to kind of push forward and get us to that next level, whether it be in the corporate hiring or with filmmakers and storytellers. It's just the time for that.
That's fabulous. Thank you.
You know, I'll piggyback off that. You know, certainly be courageous and just follow your passion. Whatever makes your heart beat faster, follow that. But one thing I have to say is also be excellent. Be great. Be really good. You know, I get a lot of indie scripts because I can get some movies made, right? I get a lot of indie scripts. 99.9% of them are bad. They're horrible, right? Just because the barriers of entry are coming down doesn't mean the requirement for excellence has come down. And the
exactly.
You know, even the books I've read, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've done rewrites on my book. I'm talking about hundreds of rewrites. I mean, like literally rewriting the book again, then rewrite it again, and making it better, and cutting this out, and then putting it back in, and then taking it. But I get sent stuff that you would think the first draft is the movie, right? The 100th draft is the movie you send out, not the first. The first is the easy part. The rewriting is the hard, and so being excellent, just because the barriers are down and just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean you just throw it out there. And people think that when you see great work like Ava's movie, that it just doesn't happen, right? It takes time and all of that work. And you know, I forgot to mention people like Julie Dash back in the day. Forgot to mention her. And I was just thinking, and then I thought about the movie Just Another Girl on the IRT. You know, they were these, you know, female black leads, young female leads, and female filmmakers. They're not new. I mean, you know, as great as Spike is, it comes off the tradition of Oscar Michaud and filmmakers like that. So, but the defining line about those, they are excellent. I mean, just really beautifully shot, beautifully edited, beautifully done down the line. And that's what I really want to push people to if you're going to do it, do it. And don't stop yourself ever, but just be excellent with it. And there's so many people that can give you feedback that are really good at all this stuff that could help you along. You know, if you're a writer, if you've written dialogue in a movie or a TV show that goes more than 2 sentences, the character has to earn that. You know, I get these things with monologues, and I'm like, what the heck is this? You know, so that's just an example. But you know, I'm sure you've read your share of really bad
scripts. I gave you a slow hand clap over here. I mean, it's really what he said, what she said, and oh my God, the be excellent thing is, it took, you know, Ava DuVernay or Spike Lee 20, 30 years to be an overnight sensation.
Ava was a publicist on a movie that I did that went to Sundance in like 2000. She was a publisher for the movie, not my publicist. She was a publicist for the movie, right?
So to your point, it's be ready. When you get the opportunity, make sure you don't squander it. There's so many times that people get the opportunity to sit in front of me or my head of programming and development, and they're not excellent. And it's just when you have the opportunity, please don't squander it. Do your homework, go out and talk to people, take the feedback from people who have done it, study your craft. And when someone gives you some advice like, yeah, no, this is not good. Don't keep, I've had people like whack-a-mole. You're going to bring me back the same idea. You're going to bring me back the same idea. You didn't change it. You didn't take the note. Like, please don't call again. But my point is, if I'm telling you, and there's so many people that sometimes you're a creator. You want to be the creator, the writer, and only Tyler Perry can do that. So it's like, you're actually not a good actress. Your script is actually pretty good. Don't be in the movie. Just don't be in the movie. So, I mean, take the note. Take the note. Be excellent. And again, what I hope to see is that we continue to be courageous and that we are persistent in our pursuit of putting out content that shows our culture, because Black people and people of color, as you said, we've always been the drivers of pop culture. And we will continue to do that and utilize all of these amazing platforms that are now available to content creators. We are actually looking at those platforms for our generation next. So, you know, don't be discouraged by not having the financing to go out and do it. Do what you love, do it with passion, and do it with excellence.
Fantastic. I'll be quick. I think if you study sort of Black cinema, late 80s, 90s, you sort of see this. I think we're here.
Right.
And I think it's going to stay here.
Okay.
And so I'm just excited about the opportunity. Like they said, it's now.
Yeah.
So seize it.
Yeah, okay. I like that. Yeah?
Yeah, I agree with what all four of you have said. I think we kind of throw around the term hashtag Black excellence. So it's so funny to hear you talk about, you know, actually be excellent. Don't just say, you know, I'm going to do this, but put your heart into it, put your soul into it, be passionate about it. And whatever that is for you, no matter what that is in your field, in your specific industry, make it happen. Like keep trying, keep working at it no matter what. That's how you're going to get to the level of excellence. So that's what I hope to see that with my generation, and I think it's going to also take a lot of collaboration, and I want us to continue telling our own stories. I think it's really interesting that the Metropolitan Opera is premiering on opening night this year, Porgy and Bess, which is a fantastic Black opera. But as a composer, I sit and think to myself, why is there only one majority opera that has an all-Black cast, and it was written by a Jewish man, not even written by a Black person?
Wow.
So that really motivates me to say, what can I do? Maybe I should write an opera. You know what I mean? So I'm really interested to see what happens in the future as we continue to build ourselves up and continue to make sure people see us the way we should be seen, which is their equal.
Fantastic. NABJ, please give a round of applause to this panel. Such a really phenomenal, candid conversation. Thank you guys so much. You know, and do the right thing. The entire movie happens over the course of one day. A powerful 24 hours and a life-changing moment. 30 years later, we continue to see these tragedies unfold. It's really up to the next generation to find a way to fight the power. Thank you, NABJ, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Can I do a shameless Sure. So before everybody goes, I just want to say there's a screening tomorrow at 10:30. It stars Ludacris. It's called The Ride. Come check it out, and it's a role you've never seen him in before. So it's 10:30 at the Aventura AMC. Thank you.